should be going through.
You want me to look in the camera?
It's recording us.
And are you ready?
Yep. You ready?
Ain't got much time.
We
Come
don't.
on.
Welcome to the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Thank you for joining our weekly discussion around grief, mental health, and your overall personal wellness. The Grief Bully Podcast will serve as a vehicle to help you navigate life's journey. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the podcast with anyone in your life that you think it will help. Let's bully grief together. What's up, beautiful people? How are you guys doing? I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Guys, we are at episode 5. Today is Monday, September the 16th, and we have a very exciting episode today. I know I use the word exciting a lot, but I am excited. I am overjoyed. I have a guest with me here today. This guest means the world to me. This guest has known me longer than anybody in the world. We are going to have today our spiritual leader, pastor, evangelist, prayer warrior, to name a few. But most importantly, I'm sure it's the title that she's the most proud of. It's my mother. Well, my brother's mother as well, but my mother. So welcome to the show, Mom.
Glad to be here.
So my mom is Shirley, and she is a pastor. She's a spiritual leader in her own right. She has been in the faith walk for quite some time, and I just wanted to have her on today because I think that it's going to shed a lot of light on quite a few topics today. So just to recap from last week, we talked about we had Dina J on, and we talked about the forgotten griever. If you haven't downloaded that episode or went back and listened to that, I would truly encourage you to do that. It was definitely a lot of gems, a lot of value, a lot of transparency and raw conversation that took place. We talked about the importance of getting grief support and grief help, as well as how it is sacred to hold other people's grief. So if you haven't had a chance, we invite you to go back, take a listen to that. And guys, as always, subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with other people. So, special guest, how are you feeling?
I'm okay.
Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Are you nervous?
A little nervous.
A little nervous.
A little
It's all
nervous.
right.
A little
It's all right.
nervous.
So I talk to my mom pretty much almost every day, multiple times, a day. So I felt that it wouldn't be any different to have her come on the show today and just have our normal dialogue that we do. I am very blessed to have her as a mother. A lot of her guidance, her insight, and love, not just from a spiritual standpoint, but from a life well lived standpoint. And so I am looking forward to sharing my mother with you today, guys. So if this is your first time on the show and you don't know my journey and you're not familiar with my journey and where grief lies, on my path, then you may not know, but this past February 14th, 2019, I unfortunately lost my father. He unfortunately lost a battle to lung cancer. And so that was something that definitely took my family by storm. And although my parents have been divorced since I was in second grade, they have remained really good friends over the last whatever amount of years. My oldest brother is 41. So they've known each other for quite some time. So I wanted to talk first. I have a couple points here, but I thought it would be important to talk about a mother's love, when it comes to your children hurting. So I did ask my mom, would she feel comfortable going into these subjects and topics? And I know it could be difficult for her, but just like last week when we talked about the forgotten griever in terms of spouses, I think sometimes when you have a parent and their children lost a parent, or if they're a parent and you lost a child and so forth and so on, sometimes it's difficult for you to allow yourself to grieve and feel because you're trying to be there for them. So I know in our time of need, my mom, both with my grandmother, and my dad, my mom showed up in a major way for us. And although at times I may not have communicated it, while I was going through my own pain, I definitely relied on her strength. her stability, and her presence. She was there. She was our ride or die, and that meant a lot to me. So, what could you say about that vantage point? So you saw us all go through different things in our lives. I have two other brothers, Michael and Jamal, and you saw us all individually go through our life and ups and downs. But what was that like to have to see us going through this tough time? Watching Daddy, coming down to his last days. You being at the hospital and being present. Just if you would speak a little bit to that, that'd be great.
All right, so let me just start off by saying it was very, it was challenging to be there for your children and you can't help them in a sense of you can't take away their pain. So just, trying to be strong for them and watching each one individually um, go through it within their own individual way because each one experienced, each one mourned in a total different way. So each person, so you can't make them all be the same. You can't handle them the same way. You have to handle them where they're at. So talking to them at different times and at the same time allowing them the time to grieve for their self in the way that they knew how to handle it. I couldn't say to them, you should act like one person, or you should act like this. That was impossible because they're different individuals. So you had to meet them where they were. So with my daughter, since we're on the line, since we're here with her on this Greek bully, just talking to her every day and just watching her go through and then being mindful of some of the things that you say to her because when a person is grieving and you try to help them, you try to reach out to them because they're in there going through their anger, they're going through their situation, you have to be careful what you say because they're latching out and it's not really latching out at you, but they're latching out of the circumstances and what they're feeling on the inside. So sometimes it could be hurtful because they can say some things that could be hurtful. Sometimes they can say a lot of things like.
Are you saying that I said some things that were hurtful? You guys, if you notice a trend out here with my last two guests, they've said that I've said some things. So I guess what you can notice, and all jokes aside, is that in my grief journey, and I agree with this, a lot of my grief does turn into anger. And, I do get really frustrated. And, at times I can say things that, are offensive. And this is why we have this show and why we have this platform is because, we want to show what those things are like. So like you said, if you are trying to be there for someone, whether it's your children or not, and they're, exemplifying certain behaviors, you might have to say, all right, let me chill out. Let me, back off a little bit. And also to the griever like myself, we have to try to hold ourselves accountable as well. Although I know that it is difficult to do that, when you're going through such a trying and emotional time. So you said something there that I thought was valuable, a lot of things, but the fact that people all grieve differently, so you said that you were there for me, in a certain way. So if if you could talk about just the vantage point, of my brothers, of course we can't tell their personal grief journey and how it was, but just like, how was that? Because for me, I'm a woman. And, I'm naturally, woman or not, I am an emotional person. And my family knows that. Where my brothers, they're not so much like that. And I personally seeing them in that way was difficult. And the only times I've ever really saw my two brothers upset like that were both when my grandmother passed away and my dad. But just how was that seeing them, as men, and young enough, black men at that, actually expressing their emotions, because they were a wreck, especially at the funeral.
Yes, they were. They were emotionally like torn up, and for me not to have ever experienced that, even as a child, as them coming up as children, never really had to see them in that capacity. So when going through that, it was like wow. But they was expressing themselves in the way they knew how. And so, with that being said, you have to be mindful just as well with them to handle them where they were. So, I would reach out to the oldest one, and we'd talk, and then we used to laugh and say some things because then he used to remind me of his father and some of the stuff and some of his responses and his reactions. So we just kind of laughed a little bit. And then I was used to say, you know what, you remind me just of your dad. And, then we just smile, or then so I used to just check on them and text them, because they grown, got their own families, and just to see where he was, and to see him, like mom like to say, I can't believe this has really happened, was really, to me, it was a little devastating because, I'm not going to get into their story and their life, but, it was some things that transpired. So it was kind of hard, you know, when you when you have a different kind of relationship with your parents. So I think to see the response from them, considering the kind of relationship that they did have, it was really it was troubling. It tore me up on the inside. But I had to be strong for them, and even now, still being strong and not. I don't know if I should need to go this far and go this way, but being
Go where you want to go.
being strong for them and allowing them to see you being strong, but forgetting about yourself, holding everything in. That's not good. So even for the listeners, you can't hold that in. You have to do some self-care. You have to take care of yourself as well. You have to open up. You have to cry. You can be around your children and cry in front of them as well. That's a good release, because if you're holding in, and it's just like having anger.
Yeah, I mean, when I a couple times I had to say to you, like, are you okay? And I felt like, and again, from my vantage point of you, I did see your strength, but I saw you hurt in a way that I've never saw you hurt either. And I was concerned for you just as much as, you were concerned for us. And it's just like, how do we really get through this? And the thing that I love about us and, how you've raised us is to believe in God, and to rely on God's strength and faith. And I told you that a long time ago. Yeah, there's some things you may or may not have done, but the best thing that you've ever did was to find the Lord and to introduce us to Him as well. And so that we were all to able to rely on faith, but you were hurting. I mean, I'm not trying to force that on you. I'm just telling you that I never saw that. And so you kind of went into it. My next point was to ask you, one, how are you doing in terms of the loss of daddy? Because, that was a friend. That was someone that, was still very present in your life. So I'm just, asking about that. Like, how are you feeling right now? What were some of the challenges that you had to go through before we get to another couple points? But, just so we can park there for a minute.
Wow. How am I feeling, and how
Yep, today, present day.
today, right now, I'm a little sad, because I felt like, I lost a best friend. I really did. I really lost a best friend, and even on his dying bed, he made a statement to me. He said, "Be there for your children. Take care of them. Be there. Get them through." And I wanted to say to him, I'm like, "What? They grown?" I said, "I mean, help them." I'm like, I'm help them as much as I can, but they are grown." And to see him the way I seen him, and I know that he would have been there for me. Um, and it wasn't no problem to me. I used to come home from work on my way home, and I would stop to see him and to check on him, just to sit there and just to talk to him. He was my best friend. He helped me through a lot of things, some good and some bad. But even in indifferent, we were close friends. 43 years, you can't take that away. And being my, can I say this, my first husband. And I know this is going to sound really deep and may sound crazy to others, but it made me feel, they always say that first one, for somewhere inside of me, I felt after the thing was over that I felt like a widow.
Hmm.
That's really deep. I felt like a loss, because I always felt like no matter what, no matter where he lived, no matter where I lived, we will always remain friends. He will always be there. Now, when I got a car problem, just saying, who do I turn, who do I go to? Because he would be there and he'd tell me what to do. I even got under the hood with him. There's just some things that he was just so important in my life, and he was important in his children's life. So how am I feeling right now? A little sad. How am I feeling? I went through an anger process. Mad, like sometimes you would think, well, God, well, why not me? Give him a chance. But everybody has um their thing to bear.
Hmm.
We all have to go through our process. So, was I angry at God? I don't want to get into that, but at one moment I was, and but now I'm at acceptance. I can accept, what God has done.
Well, now that you say that, I mean, again, this is funny because you're taking all my points
Oh, I'm sorry.
in your conversation. No, no, it's great. It's great. We're on the same wavelength here. But that was one of the next questions that I had for you. After we talked about your own experience, and thank you for sharing that. I know that that's difficult. It's definitely a trying time. And as the show progresses throughout this season, I will continue to share some of the in depth, personal, behind the scenes aspects of life after loss and then in the process of losing someone because with my dad, we had time, thank God, to have a lot of conversations. And I will have an episode where we talk about those last conversations because fortunately, pretty much my entire immediate family had the opportunity to have a conversation with him and things that he was able to say and things that we were able to say. So we'll get to that. We'll save that for another episode. But back to your point about you being angry at God. So again, listeners, audience out there on the Grief Bully, our host here, how long have you been like a pastor or in ministry?
Well, I've been, mm, let's see, pastoring. It's been like 8 years.
Okay.
In the ministry, I've been
When did you accept your call to the Lord?
in 1998.
Surely come to the
Oh,
call.
oh.
1998. Wow,
um,
that's a long time. Also, I want to plug in real quick though while we're on that is that the pastor here, and I'll drop the phone number in our show notes, has a 3 a.m. prayer call. 3 a.m. She's been waking up for 9 years to pray on a conference call. A lot of times there's no one on there, 5 people, it doesn't matter, but she's chasing after that one. So we'll drop that number in the show notes so that you can tap into that line if you find yourself awake at 3 a.m. It's definitely a dope resource. I myself have been on there, a time or two. In 9 years, a time or two. I don't do 3 a.m. that well. But for you guys, definitely out there, we want to have that as a resource. But getting to this point, with your spiritual background, with your experience, you've actually officiated, you've done eulogies. We'll get into that. But what do you say to that person? Because I'm sure if the listeners are anything like myself, now this is usually for me early on in my grief, but being angry and being mad, like man, like my dad was 60. Man, these people get to have their grandmom. God, like, why would you do this to me? Like, why? I'm trying to be a good person. Why? Like, my friend was 25. Like, how can I even begin to think that, yeah, God would let this happen? So when people are angry at God and they're feeling like that, what's some advice you can maybe give them and help them to get through those dark moments? Because I'm sure, certain that pretty much all of us have felt that way during our faith walk.
but something's funny. Anger is a part of the process. So getting angry, because we got to understand when we talk about anger, we talk about anger. Anger is a process because we could be angry at the doctors, right? We could be angry at the person that was their caregiver. We can be angry, and then when we come down to getting angry at God, not realizing God has a plan. And until we can accept the plan, sometimes we say, oh, I'm not angry. I go on with the scriptures. But if that's not doing you any good, if you're not being honest about it, because holding that anger in,
Hmm.
it will eventually explode and it'll reach out to something else. So when you're angry, it's a process. It's a part of it's a part of our emotions, and it's an emotional thing. It's you don't have to be rational, but you have to understand that God does have a plan. I know you said, why does he have a plan? This is a 3-year-old, this is a 2-year-old baby. This baby just came in this world, and how can you take it? But God has a plan, and it's a part of the plan. But until we come to the place of acceptance, that's where we can get the anger will begin to change. But until we haven't accepted it yet, then we're going to be angry. And it's okay. It's okay because it's a part of the process. People don't want you to be angry. People say, no, you're not supposed to get over it. We say that scripture, absent from the body is present with the Lord. I understand that. That's so true. But what about me? I'm still here. I'm still dealing with these feelings and emotions. I've lost something. And God, it says, I understand. You can go through the pain. You got to feel what you feel. You have to go through it in order to heal. If you don't go through the process, you're not going to heal. So being angry is okay. Now, I'm not telling you to stay there, but you have your own time of process until you accept it and go through the different stages. They got the stages of the grief. We already, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about
we talk
that
about
because
that.
I'm going to
So,
debate that. I have my own personal belief in my experience on the 5 stages of grief and loss and how they apply, in the grief journey. But no, you said a lot of good things there. So for our listeners, pretty much recapping that statement to me, it seems that you're saying that, if you find yourself angry, it's okay. Like it's not unnormal. And I know that it could feel uncomfortable because we shouldn't question God and we shouldn't feel like that. And I understand what we shouldn't. But what happens when you do? Where do you, but like you said, don't stay stuck there and use God as the refuge. So my perception is that God is here in our lives so that he can help us to heal and help us have that strength to fight and press through. So bad things are going to happen. Like that is just a reality. And we are going to have to find and seek refuge in a higher power, whatever you call your higher power. For me is God. You may have different names, and I'm for it all. But definitely to find that refuge and keep your faith going is what I understand. But that you're not wrong, and somebody needs to hear that you are not wrong for feeling angry. We do understand that, and I've talked about that before. The scripture to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and I do agree because of how I think about the afterlife and things like that. But at the same token, I always say, but what about my flesh? What about me as a human? I'm still here. So another thing that people say often is, oh, they're in a better place. But if you're anything like myself, you might have thought, what better place could it be than here with us?
right.
I'm not trying to hear that right now. But see, the key there is right now. So it's our prayer here on the Grief Bully with myself and Pastor J, aka Pastor Mom, that you will continue to look to God, and seek that help and that refuge, but to be okay with where you are and understanding that. So I have a question for you. For your generation, young folks like yourself, your young age group, how does grieving show up or not show up? Because I feel like, especially in the African American community, and then even just in my generation, and I'm pushing 34. How is that? Like, do you see your friends, co-workers, people in your age bracket, like actually grieving and mourning? Like, are they outwardly expressing their grief, or is it just like, oh, we're just gonna keep it moving, and this is a part of life? Like, if you can just speak to that, that'd be great.
Well, for my generation, I just believe that we just push it under we just keep moving. We just say, you know what, this happens. Life, this is life. We know we have to accept it, and we just keep moving. We don't, sometimes most of us won't really deal with it. We just move right along because we know life still has to go on. We can't stay stuck. So we just try to just put it behind us. And, we have the moments, we don't outwardly show stuff. And then there's times when I've seen some that have went through that terrible. They became shrines to them. They was holding on to things. They were making pictures and keeping pictures, but they wasn't healing. Because sometimes I find that if you have all the pictures and you have all the memories, you have the memories in your heart, but sometimes you have them right at you, right at front of you. Every day you looking. How do you move on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there. I think there's definitely a difference between, keeping someone's memory alive, and then relying on that. So I think that the goal here is when you do have those pictures, and we're not saying don't have those.
Right.
I have those myself, but for me personally, I don't have them on display because it's just not conducive to my healing. And I think that everyone heals in an individual way. But with that same thing is you have to eventually try to progress through that. And I think what you might be speaking of too is when people first lose someone, maybe it's a child or whomever, and it's a spouse, and it's hard to let go of those things and to make change. But I think something that I learned along my journey is that, and we'll talk about this, guys, I got so many dope episodes coming up for you. But to that point is that when we move on and we do that, sometimes we feel like that means we're forgetting that person, and we can feel guilty about that. So it's like, if I put this away, then that means that I've, to my therapist taught me to accept that that if I feel like um accepting it, what will accepting it mean? And I was like, it just would mean that I accept it. But she was saying I might be fearful to accept it because if I accept it, then maybe I'm forgetting that person. And that could be where someone is at that time. And I always want to tell you guys, a disclaimer is that I am not a professional counselor. I am not a therapist. I do not have a clinical background in any mental health field or sector. This show is solely real life experiences from real people going through real stuff, and we're going to come together around the table, and we're inviting you to mourn life's losses together and to see different perspectives. So we brought on a spouse. I have my mother here this week. We got some dope people coming in the next 2 weeks. We actually are going to have a professional grief therapist with over 25 years experience coming on the show in October. So we're going to continue to bring value to our listeners and our audience, continue to elevate. But I wanted this to be relatable, right? Like, we can just, like, we're chilling. Like, when you were nervous about coming on, I'm like, we do this every day. Like, I talk to you for hours at a time. So all we're doing now is just inviting the audience into our conversation. That's it. And I think you've done a phenomenal job, with that. So right now, guys, I want to get into our In Love and Memory segment. It's a segment of our show where it's important to us to humanize some people who have gone on, loved ones that we've lost. I invite you to, if you would like to, have your loved ones shouted out here on the show. Email us at thegriefbully@gmail.com. Subject line, In Love and Memory segment. So for this week, we have In Love and Memory of Al Koch. Al was a dear friend of mine. Shout out to his family, Jen, and the kids. Well, they're not so much kids anymore. Jen and the beautiful young ladies that are his daughters, Ashley, Tori, and Kayla. So I wanted to shout them out. And then also to Wayne Daniels. He was Adina J's cousin as well as their family. Unfortunately, the family lost him a few years back. So we just want to send in love and memory out to them, and our condolences and continued love, support, and prayers to the families of those folks. And then I want to just segue right into our inspirational boost that is brought to us by Adina J Designs. They make, create, and inspire us through decorated apparel, wood signs, and more. Go follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Adina J Designs, ADENAJAYDESIGNS. So again, they've got decorated apparel, t-shirts with dope sayings. They got wood signs, tumblers. They do it all over there. So definitely go out and follow them. They sponsor our inspirational boost. And it's a positive quote because this is Monday. So we always want to leave our audience with something positive or thought-provoking for the week to think about. So this quote is, faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until some light returns. In Lamott. So I'll run that back again. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until some light returns. In Lamott. That quote, guys, the inspirational boost of the week, will be in our show notes, so you can definitely check that out after the episode if you want to read it again or take it and apply it to your life. So we've had episode 5. I'm so excited that we've got this far. We got a long way to go. We're just getting started, just getting warmed up. But to our special guest, is there anything, 2 things you would like to leave the audience with before we sign off here today? It could be in regards to your personal experience, loss, just anything inspirational, inspiring, because you do have that heat, that ability now. It's not Sunday, so let's not. No, I'm kidding. Pastor, do you think?
No, all I want to just say is feel what you feel. Experience, go through the process. Really feel it. And if you feel it without hiding it within yourself, let it out. Because if you don't let it out, some way it's going to come out some other way. And what else to say is keep your faith. Keep the faith. Keep the faith because, this too shall pass. This too, and I don't mean pass meaning that you'll be able to make it through. And you're not alone. That's all I can really say is just keep the faith.
You can get 3 things if you want.
Oh, no.
See, you got the mom hookup. You get the special. So no, we definitely thank you for that. Also on Thursday nights at 7 p.m., Pastor Jay on the wall with her. She brings a inspirational church on Thursday, pretty much. A scripture. She'll come from a scripture and then just go in, and allows the listeners on there as well to tune in, and they can chime in, and have dialogue, after she's done bringing the word. So we'll leave a link to that as well in the show notes for you guys. This has been a great episode of The Grief Bully. Again, our whole purpose here is to have a platform for those who are grieving, whether that's life losses in terms of the loss of a loved one or anything in life in general. But we have to continue to have these conversations, break the stigmas around the silence that we can't be okay, and that grief is really kicking our butts because no one is exempt. No one. There's no one who has not lost someone and who has not been faced with that. Yes, some of our grief is a little more complicated than others, but this is a home for everyone here. Guys, listen, as always, I invite you to subscribe, share, and review the show. Follow me, your host, J.Nicole, on Instagram at I_AM_J.Nicole. Hit me up, DM me. I love to chat and connect with you. As always, guys, love and light. Peace.